The music was too loud. Not just loud, it was overwhelming, drowning out thought, swallowing silence, forcing everyone inside the room to feel something, even if it wasn't real. Adrian Williams leaned back in the VIP lounge, one arm draped lazily over the leather couch, a glass of expensive whiskey resting loosely between his fingers. The amber liquid caught the flashing lights, shimmering like something far more valuable than it actually was. Around him, laughter came easily. Too easily. A group of women crowded close, their perfume mixing in the air, their voices layered with practiced charm. One of them leaned into him, her hand sliding along his shoulder as if she belonged there. "Adrian, you've been quiet tonight," she said, her tone soft, teasing. He glanced at her, offering a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Am I?" he replied. She laughed, like it was something clever. It wasn't. From the outside, Adrian Williams had everything. Money that didn't need counting. A name that opened doors before he even knocked. A future already written, one where he would take over the Williams empire and expand it even further. People envied him. Men wanted to be him. Women wanted to be seen with him. But none of them actually knew him. And if they did, they wouldn't have envied him at all. Across the room, Adrian's phone vibrated against the glass table. Once. Twice. Then again. Persistent. He didn't need to check to know who it was. Still, he picked it up, glancing at the screen. Father. He stared at the name for a moment, his expression tightening slightly. Then he declined the call. "You're ignoring someone important," another voice chimed in, amused. Adrian placed the phone back down without answering. "They'll survive," he said flatly. But the truth was, his father never called without reason. And when he did, it usually meant one thing. Disappointment. Charles Williams was not a man who wasted words. He was precise. Controlled. Calculated. Everything Adrian wasn't. Growing up, Adrian had always felt it. The comparison. The silent judgment. The expectation that he would one day become a man exactly like his father. He never did. And somewhere along the way, he stopped trying. "Another drink?" the bartender asked, already reaching for the bottle. Adrian nodded without thinking. "Make it stronger." As the glass was refilled, he leaned back again, letting the noise swallow him. Because here, in the chaos, in the distraction, in the artificial attention, he didn't have to think about the things that actually mattered. Like the fact that he hadn't stepped into the company in weeks. Or that his father had stopped defending him in front of the board. Or that every headline about him lately carried the same tone. Billionaire heir out of control. At first, it had annoyed him. Now, he barely cared. Adrian. The voice didn't belong to anyone in the room. It was firmer. Colder. He turned his head slightly. And saw him. Benson. Standing near the edge of the VIP section, hands in his pockets, watching everything with a calm that didn't belong in a place like this. His half-brother. Unlike Adrian, Benson didn't blend into the chaos. He stood apart from it. Sharp suit. Controlled posture. Eyes that missed nothing. Adrian sighed quietly. "Of course," he muttered. Benson stepped closer, ignoring the curious looks around him. "You're not answering your phone." Adrian took a slow sip of his drink. "I noticed. Father asked for you." There it was. Adrian let out a quiet breath. "And here I thought you came because you missed me." Benson didn't smile. He never did when it came to Adrian. "This isn't a joke," Benson said. "It never is with you," Adrian replied. A brief silence passed between them. Tense. Uncomfortable. Familiar. Benson's gaze swept over the scene, the women, the drinks, the careless atmosphere. There was something in his expression. Not just disapproval. Something deeper. Disgust. "You're embarrassing the family," Benson said finally. Adrian let out a quiet laugh. Now that hurts. I'm serious. I know. Another sip. Slower this time. Tell him I'm busy. Benson's jaw tightened slightly. You're always busy when it doesn't matter. That one landed. Just slightly. Adrian set the glass down. Is that why you're here? He asked, his tone cooling. To lecture me? I'm here because someone has to clean up after you. The words hung in the air. Sharp. Intentional. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adrian smirked faintly. You always did like playing the responsible one. And you always made it easy. Silence again. Heavier this time. The music pulsed louder. But between them, everything felt still. Adrian leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. You ever get tired of it? He asked quietly. Benson frowned. Of what? Trying so hard to be perfect. A pause. Benson's expression didn't change. But something flickered behind his eyes. I don't try, he said. I just don't waste what I was given. That hit harder than anything else. Adrian looked away. Just for a second. Then he stood. Straightened his jacket. Picked up his phone. Tell father I'll see him tomorrow, he said. Benson watched him carefully. You said that last week. Adrian met his gaze. And this time, there was no humor in his expression. Then maybe he should stop expecting something different. A beat. Benson stepped back slightly, studying him like he was trying to understand something that didn't make sense. Keep going like this, he said quietly. And you're going to lose everything. Adrian smiled. But this time, it was empty. Maybe I already have. The house was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Not the kind that made you feel safe. This was the kind of silence that listened. Benson Williams stepped into the main hall, the sound of his shoes echoing softly against the polished marble floor. The lights were dim, the chandeliers casting long shadows that stretched across the walls like something waiting to be noticed. The Williams estate had always been like this. Grand. Impressive. Cold. He loosened his tie slightly as he walked deeper inside, his mind still replaying the scene from the club. Adrian. Laughing. Drinking. Wasting himself in front of people who would disappear the moment the money did. Benson stopped near the staircase, his gaze lifting slowly toward the upper floors. Somewhere up there, their father was waiting. Probably already angry. Already disappointed. But not at Benson. Never at Benson. And that was the problem. A faint sound came from the study. Voices. Benson moved toward it quietly, not out of curiosity. But out of habit. I can't keep defending him like this. Their father's voice. Sharp. Controlled. Tired. Benson paused just outside the door. You don't have to defend him, a softer voice replied. Their mother. There was a pause. Then. He's your son, Charles. A long silence followed. Then came the words Benson had heard too many times. He doesn't act like it. Something in Benson's chest tightened. Not pain. Not surprise. Just confirmation. He leaned slightly against the wall, listening without meaning to. I gave him everything, Charles continued. Every opportunity. Every advantage. And what does he do with it? Silence. He embarrasses this family. Benson closed his eyes briefly. There it was again. That word. Family. Always used when Adrian failed. Never when Benson succeeded. He's still young, their mother said quietly. He's not a child, Charles snapped. He's supposed to take over this empire one day. Another pause. And right now, Charles added. I wouldn't trust him to manage a small branch office. Benson exhaled slowly. He had spent years earning that trust. Working late. Learning everything. being exactly what their father expected. And still, it was never his name that carried the weight of the future. It was always Adrian. Even now. Even like this. The door creaked open suddenly. Benson straightened immediately. Charles Williams stepped out, his presence filling the hallway before he even spoke. "You're back," he said. Benson nodded once. "Yes, father." Charles studied him briefly. Then asked, "Did you find your brother?" Benson hesitated. Just for a second. "Yes." And a pause. "He was at a club." Charles let out a slow, controlled breath. As if he had expected nothing else. "Of course he was." Silence settled between them. Heavy. Benson glanced at him. Then spoke carefully. "He said he'll come tomorrow." Charles gave a short, humorless laugh. "He's been saying that for weeks." Another pause. Then, more quietly. "I'm running out of patience with him, Benson." There it was. Benson met his father's gaze. And for the first time, he didn't feel like the second son standing in someone else's shadow. He felt something else. Opportunity. "I can handle things at the company," Benson said calmly. Charles looked at him more closely now. Really looked. "I know you can," he said. And those 4 words meant more than they should have. Benson nodded slightly. But inside, something shifted. Because for the first time, it felt real. The possibility that Adrian might fall far enough for someone else to take his place. Not out of luck. Not out of inheritance. But because he earned it. Charles placed a hand briefly on Benson's shoulder. A rare gesture. "Keep doing what you're doing," he said. Then he walked away. And just like that, the hallway was quiet again. Benson stood there alone. But this time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt clear. He turned slowly, walking toward the study. Stepping inside. Closing the door behind him. The room smelled faintly of leather and old paper. Familiar. Comforting. He moved to the desk. Rested his hands on the surface. And for a long moment, he said nothing. Did nothing. Then, he reached into his pocket. Pulled out his phone. The screen lit up softly in the dim room. He stared at it. Not hesitating. Not questioning. Just deciding. Then he dialed. The line rang once. Twice. Then, a voice answered. Low. Expectant. "Is it done?" Benson's expression didn't change. "No," he said calmly. A pause. "Not yet." Silence on the other end. Then, "What's the delay?" Benson walked slowly toward the window, looking out over the estate. The empire that wasn't his. Not yet. "I want it to be clean," he said. Clean. Yes. A pause. Then Benson added, his voice quieter now. But sharper. "No mistakes. No doubts." Another silence. Then the voice asked. "And Adrian?" Benson's grip on the phone tightened slightly. He looked out into the darkness. "He won't see it coming." The words came too easily. Too naturally. And for the first time, Benson allowed himself to feel it. Not guilt. Not hesitation. Something colder. Control. "Good," the voice replied. The call ended. Benson lowered the phone slowly. The room was silent again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was waiting. And somewhere in the city, Adrian Williams laughed, drank, and lived like nothing could touch him. Unaware that everything was already in motion. The night started like every other mistake. Loud. Careless. Forgettable. Adrian didn't plan to stay out late. He rarely did anymore, not because he had changed, but because even the distractions were beginning to feel repetitive. Empty. But that night, something felt different. He couldn't explain it. Just a quiet restlessness sitting beneath his skin. The club was already alive when he arrived. Lights flashing. Music pounding. People moving like nothing in the world mattered. Adrian stepped in, greeted instantly by familiar faces. Smiles. Laughter. Attention. Adrian, someone called. A glass was placed in his hand before he even asked. He didn't question it. Didn't check it. Didn't think. He drank. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Time blurred quickly in places like this. There were voices. Faces leaning in too close. Hands brushing against him. Music growing louder. And then something shifted. Not around him. Inside him. A strange heaviness settled behind his eyes. His vision softened at the edges. The noise dulled. Adrian frowned slightly, blinking hard. That wasn't normal. "You okay?" a voice asked, too close to his ear. He turned, trying to focus. A woman stood beside him. Beautiful. Familiar, maybe. Or maybe not. "I'm fine," he muttered. But he wasn't. His grip on the glass loosened slightly. The room tilted, not dramatically, just enough to feel wrong. "Maybe you should sit," she suggested gently. Her hand touched his arm. Steadying. Guiding. Adrian didn't resist. Didn't question. That was his first mistake. Everything after that came in fragments. A hallway. A different kind of silence. Soft carpet beneath his feet. A door opening. The faint scent of expensive perfume. Then darkness. Morning came too fast. Adrian woke up with a headache that felt like something was pressing against the inside of his skull. His eyes opened slowly. The ceiling above him was unfamiliar. Too elegant. Too still. He frowned, pushing himself up slightly. His body felt heavy. Unresponsive. Where was he? He looked around. A hotel room. Large. Luxurious. Panic didn't hit immediately. Confusion did. Then he noticed the other side of the bed. And everything stopped. A woman lay beside him. Half covered. Still asleep. Adrian froze. His heart began to pound, not fast, but hard. Heavy. He didn't recognize her. That alone wasn't unusual. But something about this felt wrong. He looked down at himself. His shirt was gone. His memory empty. "What the hell?" he muttered under his breath. The woman stirred slightly. Adrian stiffened. She opened her eyes slowly. Blinking. Then focusing. And when she saw him, her expression changed. Shock. Then something else. Recognition. "You," she whispered. Adrian swallowed. "Do I know you?" The question came out more desperate than he intended. But before she could answer, the door burst open. The sound was violent. Sudden. Unforgiving. Adrian turned sharply. A man stood at the entrance. Tall. Well-dressed. Furious. Behind him. Two others. Witnesses. For a second, no one spoke. Then the man's gaze landed on the bed. On Adrian. On the woman. And everything exploded. "What is this?" he roared. The woman sat up abruptly, clutching the sheets around her. "Jake, Jake." The name hit Adrian like a delayed impact. Mr. Jake. His father's business partner. Adrian's blood ran cold. This isn't what it looks like, Adrian started. But even as he said it, he knew how it sounded. Because it looked exactly like what it was. Jake stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. You think I'm a fool, he snapped. No, listen, I don't remember. Don't lie to me. The room felt smaller. Tighter. I didn't, this isn't, Adrian struggled. But the words had no weight. No proof. Jake laughed bitterly. Sleeping with my wife in a hotel room, and you don't remember. Silence. Adrian didn't. And that was the worst part. He looked at the woman. Desperate. Tell him, he said. But she didn't meet his eyes. That was the second moment everything broke. I didn't force anything, she said quietly. Jake's expression darkened further. Adrian felt something inside him drop. That's not, he started again. But the damage was already done. Phones appeared. Photos taken. The moment captured. The narrative sealed. Jake stepped back, shaking his head slowly. I trusted your family, he said. Then his gaze hardened. This is over. He turned and walked out. Just like that. Adrian sat there. Frozen. The room was silent again. But not the same silence. This one was final. He looked down at his hands. At the bed. At the reality he couldn't explain. His chest tightened. Because deep down, beneath the confusion, beneath the denial, something told him the truth. This wasn't an accident. It was too perfect. Too precise. Too clean. And for the first time, Adrian felt it. Not fear. Not regret. Something worse. Realization. He had just walked into something he didn't understand. And whatever it was, it had already destroyed him. By the time Adrian left the hotel, the world already knew. It didn't happen slowly. It never does when power is involved. His phone started ringing before he even reached the elevator. Messages flooded in. Missed calls stacked one after another. Notifications he didn't have the strength to open. Headlines moved faster than truth. Billionaire heir caught in scandal. Adrian Williams exposed an affair with business partner's wife. Williams' family reputation at risk. Each one worse than the last. Each one louder than anything he could say. Adrian stood outside the hotel for a moment, the morning sun too bright, too sharp against his eyes. The world felt different. Not physically, but socially. Like something invisible had shifted. People weren't looking at him the same way anymore. Some recognized him. Whispered. Pointed. Others pretended not to. Which was worse? He got into his car without saying a word. Shut the door. And for the first time since waking up, he allowed himself to sit still. Just breathe. This isn't real, he muttered. But even as he said it, he knew it was. His phone rang again. This time, he didn't ignore it. Father. Adrian stared at the name for a long moment. Then answered. Where are you? Charles Williams' voice came through. No greeting. No emotion. Just control. Adrian swallowed. I'm on my way home. A pause. Good, Charles said. Then. The line went dead. No anger. No shouting. That was worse. The Williams estate felt colder than usual. Adrian stepped inside, the familiar space now carrying a weight he couldn't ignore. The staff avoided his eyes. Moved around him quietly. Respectfully. But differently. Like he was no longer someone to admire. Just someone to tolerate. Your father is waiting, one of them said softly. Adrian nodded. His steps felt heavier as he walked toward the study. The same room Benson had stood in the night before. Only now, everything had changed. He stopped at the door, hand resting against it. For a second, he considered walking away. But there was nowhere to go. So he opened it. Charles Williams stood near the window, his back turned. Still. Silent. Benson sat on one of the chairs nearby, watching. Then Charles turned. And the look on his face was worse than anger. It was disappointment. "Explain it," he said. Adrian exhaled slowly. "I can't." The words hung in the air. Heavy. Charles's expression hardened. "You can't," he repeated. "I don't remember what happened," Adrian said, his voice steady but strained. "I woke up there. That's it." Silence. Benson shifted slightly in his seat. Charles stepped forward. Slowly. Deliberately. "And you expect me to believe that?" he asked. Adrian didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, he didn't know what to believe himself. "I'm telling you what I know," he said finally. Charles let out a sharp breath. "What you know," he repeated. Then, colder. "You were found in a hotel room with a married woman. My business partner's wife." Each word felt like a strike. "The entire city is talking about it," Charles continued. "Our partners are questioning us. Our reputation." "I didn't plan it," Adrian cut in. That was the wrong thing to say. Charles's eyes darkened. "Plan it," he repeated. A pause. Then, sharper. "So it just happened?" Adrian clenched his jaw. "I don't know what happened," he said. Silence. And then, Charles laughed. But there was no humor in it. "Of course you don't," he said. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "For years, Adrian," he continued, quieter now, "I've defended you." Adrian's chest tightened. "I told people you would grow out of this," Charles said. "That you would take responsibility. That you would become the man this family needs." A pause. "But you didn't." Silence filled the room. Adrian felt it. Not just the words, but what came with them. Finality. "I didn't do this," Adrian said again, softer this time. Charles turned back. "And even if you didn't," he replied, "you've lived in a way that made it believable. That hit harder than anything else." Adrian didn't respond. Because there was nothing to say to that. Benson spoke then. Calm. Measured. "The damage is already done," he said. Adrian looked at him. Of course he would say that. Charles nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. Then he faced Adrian fully. And in that moment, Adrian understood. This wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a decision. "I cannot trust you with this family's future," Charles said. The words were steady. Unshaken. "And I will not allow you to destroy what I've built." Adrian's breath slowed. "Father." "No," Charles cut him off. Silence. Then, clearly, "You are no longer part of this company." Adrian felt something inside him drop. "And until you prove otherwise," Charles added, "you are no longer part of this family either." The room went still. Adrian stared at him. "You're disowning me?" he asked quietly. Charles didn't hesitate. "Yes." Just one word. That was all it took. Adrian let out a small breath. Not a laugh. Not quite. More like disbelief trying to survive. "So that's it?" he asked. Charles didn't respond. Because for him, it was. Adrian looked around the room. At the walls. At the space he had grown up in. At Benson. Their eyes met briefly. And for a second, Adrian thought he saw something there. Not sympathy. Something else. Something colder. Then it was gone. Adrian nodded slowly. "All right," he said. No anger. No shouting. Just quiet acceptance. He turned. Walked to the door. Paused. Then said without looking back, "I hope it was worth it." Charles didn't respond. And Adrian didn't wait for him to. He walked out. This time. No one stopped him. No one called his name. No one cared. The doors of the estate closed behind him with a soft, final sound. And just like that, Adrian Williams lost everything. Not gradually. Not over time. In a single day. The first call he made wasn't to a friend. It was to someone he believed would understand. Adrian stood by the roadside, the gates of the estate still visible behind him, tall, unmoving, already distant. His car keys felt heavier in his hand than they should have. Everything did. He unlocked the car, sat inside, and closed the door slowly. For a moment, he didn't move. The silence inside the car pressed against him. Not peaceful. Not comforting. Just empty. He looked down at his phone. There were dozens of messages. Missed calls. Notifications. But none of them mattered. Because there was only one name he was searching for. Anita. His thumb hovered over her contact. Just for a second. Then he called. The line rang. Once. Twice. Then. She answered. Adrian. Her voice was softer than everything else that morning. Familiar. For a brief moment. He felt something loosen inside his chest. "Yeah," he said quietly. A pause. "I saw the news," she added. Of course she had. Everyone had. Adrian swallowed. "I need to see you." Another pause. Longer this time. "Now?" she asked. "Yes." Silence. Then. "Okay." She didn't hug him when he arrived. That was the first sign. Anita stood by the door of her apartment, arms crossed lightly, her expression unreadable. Not angry. Not emotional. Just distant. Adrian stepped inside slowly. "I didn't do it," he said immediately. The words came out fast. Urgent. Because for some reason, he needed her to believe him. Anita closed the door behind him. "I didn't plan it. I don't even remember what happened," he continued. "Something's not right." "I know." He stopped. Her answer wasn't what he expected. "You know," he repeated. Anita nodded slightly. "I believe you," she said. Relief hit him too quickly. Too strongly. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Thank you," he said. But something about the way she said it didn't sit right. Too calm. Too easy. "I'm glad you do," he added. Anita looked at him for a moment. Really looked at him. Then she sighed softly. "It doesn't change anything." The relief disappeared just as quickly as it came. Adrian frowned. "What do you mean?" She walked past him, moving toward the window. Keeping her distance. "I mean," she said slowly. "Whether you did it or not, the damage is done." Adrian stared at her. "So," he asked. "We deal with it. Together." That word hung between them. Together. Anita turned to face him again. Her expression had changed. Now. There was something else in her eyes. Something colder. "I can't do that," she said. Adrian blinked. "Can't, or won't." A pause. Anita didn't answer immediately. Then. Both. The word landed quietly. But it shattered something. Adrian took a step closer. Anita, listen to me. No, you listen, she cut in. Her voice wasn't loud. But it was firm. You're not who you used to be, Adrian. That caught him off guard. What does that mean? It means, she said, choosing her words carefully. You're not the man I started dating. Adrian let out a short, disbelieving breath. So this is about the headlines, he asked. It's about reality. Silence. Anita looked at him again. And this time, there was no softness left. You've been spiraling for a long time, she said. The parties. The scandals. The way your father looks at you now. That's not. And now this, she continued. This is bigger than everything else. Adrian's jaw tightened. I told you I didn't do it. I believe you, she said again. But belief doesn't fix consequences. That sentence felt final. Adrian stared at her. Trying to understand. Trying to find something. Anything. That still felt like the woman he knew. I lost everything today, he said quietly. She didn't react. I came here because I thought, he paused. Because he thought what? That she would stay. That she would fight for him. That she would choose him. Because I thought you'd be here, he finished. Anita's expression softened. Just slightly. But it wasn't enough. I was, she said gently. Past tense. That one word said everything. Adrian felt it. The shift. The distance. The ending. When, he asked. Anita didn't pretend not to understand. A while ago, she admitted. Silence filled the room. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just, heavy. I didn't leave because of today, she added. Then why now? Adrian asked. She hesitated. Then finally said. Because now, there's nothing left to stay for. That was the moment. Not the hotel. Not his father. Not the headlines. This. This was what broke him. Adrian let out a slow breath. Then nodded. Once. All right, he said quietly. No anger. No argument. Just acceptance. He turned toward the door. Adrian. He paused. But didn't turn back. I'm sorry, she said. He smiled faintly. But she couldn't see it. Don't be, he replied. Then he walked out. By the time he got back into his car, his phone felt heavier than ever. Still full of messages. Still ringing occasionally. But now, he knew better. He scrolled through his contacts. Names that once meant something. Friends. Connections. People who used to laugh with him. Stand beside him. He called one. No answer. Another. Declined. Another. Hey. I think it's better we don't talk right now. Click. The pattern repeated. Again. And again. Until finally, he stopped trying. Because the truth had become clear. He hadn't just lost his family. He hadn't just lost his name. He had lost everyone. And this time, there was no one left to call. Adrian leaned back in his seat. Closed his eyes. And for the first time since it all began, he didn't try to fight it. The silence. The emptiness. The weight of everything he had lost. He let it settle. Because there was nothing else left. By evening, Adrian had nowhere left to go. At first, he didn't believe it. Even after everything that had happened, the scandal, his father's words, Anita walking away, some part of him still held onto a quiet assumption. This would pass. Something would fix itself. Someone would call. But no one did. He had driven aimlessly for hours, the city stretching endlessly around him, familiar places now feeling strangely distant. Restaurants he used to visit. Hotels he once walked into without thinking. Clubs that had welcomed him like royalty. Now, he didn't belong in any of them. His phone battery dropped slowly. 20%. 15%. 10%. Still no message that mattered. Just headlines. Just noise. At some point, he parked the car by the side of a quiet street. Turned off the engine. And sat there. The silence returned. But this time, it stayed. Adrian leaned back in his seat, staring through the windshield at nothing in particular. People passed by on the sidewalk. Normal lives. Normal problems. No one recognized him here. No one cared. And for the first time in his life, Adrian felt invisible. For a moment, he stood there. Not moving. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know where to go. That realization settled slowly. He had spent his entire life surrounded by options. Places to go. People to call. Decisions that were never really difficult. Now, there was nothing. He started walking. No destination. No plan. Just movement. The city at night looked different when you weren't part of it. When you weren't inside the lights and music and noise. But outside, looking in. He passed a small restaurant. The smell of food drifted through the air. Warm. Inviting. Adrian slowed slightly. His stomach tightened again. Then he looked down at himself. Still well-dressed. Still carrying the appearance of someone who belonged. But appearances didn't pay anymore. And pride. Pride didn't feed you either. He kept walking. Time passed. He didn't measure it. The streets grew quieter. Shops closed. Lights dimmed. The city moved on without him. Eventually, Adrian found himself in a part of town he had never paid attention to before. Simpler buildings. Fewer people. Less noise. He stopped near a bench. Old. Worn. He stared at it for a moment. Then sat down. The wood felt harder than expected. Uncomfortable. But he didn't move. Because he was tired. Not just physically. Tired in a way that came from losing something you didn't know how to replace. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Hands clasped together loosely. His mind was quieter now. No anger. No panic. Just exhaustion. The kind that strips everything else away. He thought about his father. The look in his eyes. She wasn't wrong. Adrian exhaled slowly. The night stretched around him. At some point, he leaned back slightly. Resting his head against the bench. The sky above was dark. Empty. He stared at it for a long time. Until his eyes grew heavy. Until the exhaustion finally won. And without realizing it. Adrian Williams. Once the heir to a billion-dollar empire. Fell asleep on a public bench. No security. No comfort. No one watching over him. Just another man in the night. He woke up suddenly. The cold had settled into his bones. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then reality returned. Slow. Unforgiving. Adrian sat up, rubbing his face with both hands. Morning had come. The city was waking up again. People moved around him. Walking past. Talking. Living. Some glanced at him briefly. Most didn't. And just like that, he understood something. This world didn't stop for anyone. Not for power. Not for loss. Not for him. Adrian stood up slowly. His body stiff. His mind clearer than it had been the night before. Because something had changed. Not dramatically. Not visibly. But internally. For the first time. He wasn't waiting for someone to fix things. He wasn't expecting a call. Or a solution. Or a way back. That version of him was gone. He looked around once more. Then took a step forward. And began walking again. This time. Not aimlessly. But because he had no choice. Morning didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like continuation. The same weight. The same silence. Adrian walked without direction, the early light of the city doing nothing to warm what had settled inside him overnight. Or at least, he used to have somewhere to be. Now, he just walked. The hunger returned before he could ignore it. Sharper this time. More insistent. His stomach tightened, reminding him of something basic, something simple, something he had never really had to think about before. Food. A small cafe sat on the corner. Modest. Quiet. Almost forgettable. He would have walked past it. But the smell stopped him. Fresh bread. Warm. Soft. For a moment, he just stood there. Then, without fully deciding to, he stepped inside. The bell above the door rang softly. It was quieter than he expected. A few tables. A couple of customers. No one looked at him twice. That alone felt strange. Adrian moved toward the counter slowly. A young woman stood behind it, arranging plates with careful precision. She didn't rush. Didn't seem distracted. She noticed him after a moment. Looked up. Their eyes met briefly. There was no recognition. No judgment. Just a simple, neutral glance. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was calm. Genuine. Adrian hesitated. "Morning," he replied. There was a pause. "Can I help you?" she asked. The question was simple. Normal. But Adrian didn't have a normal answer. He glanced at the menu behind her. Prices listed clearly. Affordable, for most people. Not for him. Not right now. He started. Then stopped. For a second, pride tried to speak. Tried to find a way around it. But pride didn't have anything to offer anymore. He exhaled quietly. "I don't have any money," he said. The words felt heavier than they should have. Not because of what they meant. But because of what they represented. The woman didn't react immediately. She simply looked at him. Studied him for a brief moment. Not his clothes. Not his appearance. Him. Adrian braced himself. For rejection. For dismissal. For the polite version of leave. Instead. She turned away. Picked up a plate. Placed a piece of bread on it. Then added something else. Simple. But enough. She set it on the counter in front of him. "Sit," she said. Adrian blinked. "I said I don't." "I heard you," she interrupted gently. No irritation. No pity. Just understanding. "Sit," she repeated. Something in her tone made it difficult to argue. Adrian hesitated. Then slowly took the seat closest to the counter. The chair felt unfamiliar. Not because it was uncomfortable. But because he had never sat in a place like this without choosing to. The plate sat in front of him. Warm. Real. For a moment. He didn't touch it. Then. He picked it up. The first bite was quiet. Not dramatic. Not overwhelming. Just grounding. He hadn't realized how hungry he was. Or how much something so simple could matter. Across the counter, the woman continued working as if nothing unusual had happened. No staring. No lingering attention. Just routine. After a few minutes, Adrian spoke. Then she shrugged lightly. You looked like you needed it. That was it. No deeper explanation. No hidden motive. Just something simple. Adrian leaned back slightly. I'm not exactly, he hesitated. Someone people usually help. She wiped her hands on a cloth, then looked at him again. Maybe that's the problem, she said. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? She tilted her head, studying him for a moment. You look like someone who's used to people doing things for a reason, she said. Adrian didn't answer. Not everything has to be like that, she added. Silence settled between them. Not awkward. Not heavy. Just calm. What's your name? She asked after a moment. Adrian hesitated. For the first time in a long time. His name didn't feel like something he could just say. Adrian, he said finally. She nodded. I'm Grace. The name fit. Simple. Quiet. Like her. Adrian glanced around the cafe again. You work here alone? Most days, she said. It's not very busy. He nodded. Another pause. You can come back, she added casually. If you need food. Adrian looked at her. You don't even know me. Grace gave a small, almost amused smile. I know enough. That caught him off guard. What's that supposed to mean? She met his gaze. It means, she said. You're not as okay as you're pretending to be. The words were quiet. But they landed. Adrian looked away. Because she wasn't wrong. And for some reason. He didn't want her to see that. Thanks for the food, he said, standing slowly. Grace nodded. No problem. He hesitated for a second. Then asked. Do I owe you anything? She shook her head. No. A pause. Just don't waste it, she added. Adrian frowned slightly. Waste what? She gave a small shrug. The chance to start over. The words stayed with him longer than they should have. Because no one had said anything like that to him before. Not his father. Not Anita. Not anyone. Adrian nodded slowly. Then turned and walked toward the door. The bell rang softly as he stepped outside. The city felt the same. But something inside him wasn't. It wasn't hope. Not yet. But it was something. Something small. Something real. And for the first time since everything fell apart, Adrian didn't feel completely alone. Adrian told himself he wouldn't go back. Not because he didn't want to. But because he didn't belong there. Places like that cafe, people like Grace. They weren't part of his world. Or at least, they never used to be. But by afternoon, hunger returned. And with it, something else. Memory. The warmth of the bread. The calm in her voice. The way she looked at him. Like he wasn't something broken. Adrian found himself standing across the street from the cafe again. He didn't remember deciding to come. He just did. The door was open this time. The same quiet atmosphere. The same simple space. Grace stood behind the counter again. She looked up when the bell rang. Their eyes met. There was no surprise in her expression. You came back, she said. Adrian nodded slightly. I said I might. A small pause. You didn't, she replied. He almost smiled. He did. This time, it felt easier. She placed another plate in front of him. No questions. No hesitation. Adrian looked at it. Then at her. I'll pay you back, he said. Grace shook her head. You already said that. I mean it. I know. Silence settled again. But it wasn't uncomfortable. Adrian ate slowly this time. Not because he wasn't hungry, but because he was thinking. When he finished, he didn't stand up immediately. That surprised him. He stayed. "You don't have anywhere to go, do you?" Grace asked suddenly. The question caught him off guard. Adrian leaned back slightly. "That obvious?" Grace shrugged. "You didn't leave the first time." He let out a quiet breath. "Not really," he admitted. Saying it out loud made it feel more real. More permanent. Grace nodded once. Then turned away, wiping the counter slowly. "I have a spare room," she said. Adrian blinked. "What?" She didn't look at him when she continued. "It's small," she added. "Nothing like what you're used to." He stared at her. "You're serious?" Now she looked at him. "Do I look like I'm joking?" "No." She didn't. Adrian stood slowly. "I can't just." "You can," she interrupted. A pause. "Unless you'd rather sleep on the street again." That hit. Not harsh. Just honest. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. "You don't even know me," he said again. Grace tilted her head slightly. "And you don't know me either," she replied. Silence. Then she added. "But I know what it looks like when someone has nowhere left to go." That wasn't something you said without understanding it. Adrian studied her for a moment. "You've been there?" he asked quietly. Grace didn't answer immediately. Then. "Yes." Just one word. But it carried weight. Real weight. Adrian looked away. Because suddenly, this wasn't just charity. It was something else. Understanding. "You don't have to decide now," Grace said, turning back to her work. Another pause. "But the offer stands." Adrian stood there for a moment longer. Thinking. About pride. About comfort. About everything he had lost. Then. About last night. The cold. The emptiness. The silence that didn't feel like peace. He exhaled slowly. "Okay," he said. Grace glanced at him. "You're sure?" "No," Adrian admitted. That made her smile slightly. "Good," she said. He frowned. "Why is that good?" "Because it means you're being honest." Adrian didn't respond. But something about that felt right. Grace's home was exactly what she said it would be. Small. Simple. Nothing unnecessary. Nothing excessive. The kind of place built on function, not image. Adrian stepped inside quietly. It felt different. Not just physically. There was warmth here. Not from luxury. But from something else. Life. Grace placed her keys on the small table near the door. "You can take that room," she said, pointing down a short hallway. Adrian walked toward it slowly. Opened the door. The room was modest. A bed. A small dresser. A window. That was it. No designer furniture. No polished surfaces. No excess. Just enough. He stepped inside. Set his jacket down. And for a moment, he just stood there. Taking it in. Because this was his reality now. Not temporary. Not symbolic. Real. "You okay?" Grace asked from the doorway. Adrian nodded. "Yeah." A pause. "Just adjusting." She leaned lightly against the doorframe. "You'll get used to it," she said. He looked at her. "I'm not sure I want to." Grace didn't argue. She just nodded. "Fair enough." Another pause. Then she pushed herself off the frame. "There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry later," she said. Adrian gave a small nod. "Thanks." She hesitated for a moment. Then added. You don't owe me anything. Adrian looked at her. You keep saying that. And you keep trying to pay me back. A faint smile touched his lips. I'm not used to this. I can tell. Silence. Then Grace turned and walked away, leaving him alone in the room. Adrian sat down on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped slightly under his weight. Unfamiliar. But not uncomfortable. He leaned forward, resting his hands together. His mind was quieter now. Not empty. But less chaotic. Because for the first time since everything fell apart, he wasn't outside. He wasn't wandering. He wasn't trying to survive the night. He had a place. Even if he didn't feel like he deserved it. Adrian leaned back slowly, staring at the ceiling. And for the first time in 2 days, he felt something close to rest. Not peace. Not yet. But something close enough. The first morning felt wrong. Not because of where he was, but because of what was missing. No calls. No schedule. No urgency. Adrian opened his eyes slowly, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling above him. For a moment, he didn't move. His body expected routine. Meetings. Messages. Decisions waiting to be made. Instead, there was silence. He sat up, running a hand over his face. The room was small, but it held something his old life never did. Stillness. Not forced. Not empty. Just quiet. From the kitchen, he could hear movement. Light sounds. Plates. Water running. Life. Adrian stood up slowly and stepped out of the room. Grace was already awake. Standing at the counter, tying her hair back, moving with the kind of efficiency that came from doing the same thing every day. You're up, she said without turning. Yeah. His voice sounded different. Lower. Less certain. You sleep okay? Adrian hesitated. I think so. Grace nodded. There's tea, she said, pointing slightly. And bread. He glanced at the table. Simple breakfast. Not what he was used to. But somehow, he didn't mind. He sat down. Took a piece of bread. For a while, neither of them spoke. It wasn't awkward. Just natural. What now? Adrian asked eventually. Grace turned to look at him. What do you mean? I mean, what am I supposed to do? The question sounded strange even to him. In his old life, he never had to ask it. Now, he didn't have an answer. Grace leaned lightly against the counter. You work, she said simply. Adrian let out a short breath. Doing what? Anything. He frowned. It's not that simple. It is, she replied. He shook his head slightly. You don't understand. Grace raised an eyebrow. Then explain it to me. Adrian leaned back in his chair. I've never had to start like this, he admitted. Grace didn't respond immediately. Then she said. Then you learn. That was it. No long explanation. No sympathy. Just truth. Adrian looked down at the table. Learning. Starting from nothing. The idea felt heavy. But also necessary. Later that day, Grace took him to the cafe. Not as a guest. As something else. You can help here, she said. Adrian glanced around. Doing what exactly? Cleaning. Serving. Whatever needs to be done. He nodded slowly. It wasn't glamorous. Not impressive. But it was something. All right, he said. Grace handed him an apron. Start with the tables. Adrian took it. For a second, he just stared at it. Then he put it on. It felt strange. Not because it was uncomfortable, but because of what it meant. This was real. No titles. No status. Just work. The first few hours were harder than he expected. Not physically, but mentally. Customers didn't recognize him. Didn't care who he used to be. They just wanted service. Quick. Efficient. Normal. Adrian made mistakes. Small ones. Carrying the wrong order. Forgetting things. Things he never had to think about before. At one point, a customer frowned at him. "You knew?" the man asked. Adrian nodded. "Clearly," the man muttered. Adrian didn't respond. In the past. He would have. Now. He just moved on. Grace watched him from behind the counter. Not stepping in. Not correcting him immediately. Just observing. Letting him figure it out. And slowly. He did. By the afternoon, his movements were more natural. Less hesitant. He wasn't good. Not yet. But he was trying. And for the first time in a long time. That meant something. When they closed for the day, Adrian sat down heavily in one of the chairs. His body felt tired. A different kind of tired. Earned. Grace placed a glass of water in front of him. "You survived," she said. Adrian let out a quiet breath. Barely. A small smile touched her lips. "You'll get better." He nodded. "I have to." Silence settled between them again. Then Adrian spoke. "Why are you helping me?" Grace looked at him. "I already told you." "Yeah," he said. "But that's not enough." A pause. Grace leaned against the table. "Because someone helped me once," she said. Adrian waited. But she didn't say more. And somehow. He understood. That night, back at the apartment, Adrian sat by the window. The city lights stretched in the distance. Still the same city. But a different life. He thought about everything. What he had lost. What he had become. And what he might still become. For the first time. The future didn't feel guaranteed. But it didn't feel empty either. It felt open. And that scared him. But also pushed him forward. Adrian exhaled slowly. Then said quietly, almost to himself, "I'm not going back. Not to who he was. Not to that life. Whatever came next. He would face it differently. Because now. He had no choice." Work became routine faster than Adrian expected. Wake up. Go to the cafe. Clean. Serve. Learn. Repeat. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't impressive. But it was steady. And for someone who had lost everything overnight, steadiness felt like survival. Days turned into weeks. The mistakes became fewer. His movements sharper. Customers stopped asking if he was new. Some even smiled at him now. It was small. But it mattered. Still. There was a limit to what the cafe could offer. Adrian knew it. Grace knew it too. They just hadn't said it out loud yet. One evening, after closing, Grace wiped down the last table while Adrian stacked chairs. "You won't stay here forever," she said suddenly. Adrian paused. Was that a statement or a warning, he asked. He let out a quiet breath. Capability doesn't matter if no one's willing to give you a chance. A pause. "Then take one," she said. Adrian frowned slightly. "From who?" Grace reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I heard about something," she said, handing it to him. Adrian unfolded it slowly. A job listing. Not glamorous. Not high level. An assistant role. Under someone named Richard Moore. The name made Adrian pause. He knew it. Not personally, but professionally. Richard Moore wasn't just anyone. He was respected. Strategic. Careful with his reputation. Why would someone like him hire me? Adrian asked. Grace shrugged. Maybe he won't. Adrian looked at her. Then what's the point? The point, she said, is that you try. Silence. Adrian stared at the paper. His name. His reputation. His past. Everything about him now worked against him. But doing nothing. That wasn't an option anymore. All right, he said quietly. The building was exactly what he expected. Clean. Professional. Everything his life used to be. Adrian stood outside for a moment before walking in. Not because he was afraid. But because he understood something now. That he hadn't before. He didn't belong here anymore. Not like he used to. Inside, the receptionist barely looked at him. Interview, she asked. Yes. Name. Adrian Williams. There was a brief pause. Recognition. Subtle. But there. Her expression didn't change. But her tone did. Take a seat. He did. Waiting felt different now. Longer. Heavier. Eventually, a door opened. Mr. Williams. Adrian stood. The man waiting inside wasn't what he expected. Richard Moore was older. Calm. Observant. The kind of man who didn't speak unnecessarily. Sit, he said. Adrian did. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Moore leaned back slightly. You've been in the news, he said. Straight to the point. Adrian didn't flinch. Yes. Do you want to explain it? A pause. No. That caught Moore's attention. Why not? Because anything I say won't change what people believe. Silence. Then. A faint nod. Fair, Moore said. Another pause. You had opportunities most people don't, he continued. And you wasted them. Adrian didn't argue. That's true. Moore studied him more closely now. And yet, you're here. Adrian met his gaze. I need to work. Simple. Honest. Moore tapped his fingers lightly against the desk. I don't need someone like you, he said. Adrian nodded. I figured. But, Moore continued. I might have something else. Adrian didn't move. Explain, he said. Moore leaned forward slightly. You won't have a title, he said. You won't have recognition. A pause. You'll do the work. Another pause. But someone else will take the credit. The words settled slowly. Heavy. Adrian frowned. You're serious? Completely. Silence. For Adrian. This wasn't just a job. It was a test. Of pride. Of identity. Of everything he used to be. You'll be invisible, Moore added. That word again. Invisible. Adrian leaned back slightly. In his old life. This would have been an insult. Something he would reject instantly. But that life was gone. And this was something else. A chance. Not a perfect one. Not a fair one. But real. I'll take it, Adrian said. Moore raised an eyebrow. No hesitation. There's nothing left to hesitate about. A long silence followed. Then Moore nodded. Good. He stood. Report tomorrow. Just like that. No congratulations. No approval. Just acceptance. That night, Adrian sat across from Grace again. He placed the paper on the table. I got the job, he said. Grace looked up. That was fast. He nodded. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Adrian hesitated. Then said. I do the work, someone else gets the credit. Silence. Grace didn't react immediately. Then she asked. Can you live with that? Adrian leaned back. For a moment, he didn't answer. Because the truth was, he didn't know. But he also knew something else. I don't have the luxury not to, he said. Grace studied him. Then nodded slowly. Then make it count. Adrian let out a quiet breath. That was the plan. Not to stay here. Not to remain invisible. But to learn. To grow. To rebuild. Without anyone knowing. Because this time, he wasn't chasing status. He was building something real. Even if no one saw it. The first day felt like a step backward. Adrian arrived early. Earlier than anyone else. Not because he was eager. But because he understood something now. If he wanted to survive this version of his life, he couldn't afford to be anything less than prepared. The office was quiet when he walked in. Clean. Structured. Controlled. A world he used to belong to. Now. He moved through it like a visitor. No one greeted him. No one questioned him. He wasn't important enough for either. That was the point. Over here. The voice came from across the room. A young man stood near one of the desks. Well-dressed. Confident. Adrian recognized him immediately. Daniel Moore. Richard Moore's son. The one who would be taking the credit. Adrian walked over slowly. Daniel looked him up and down. Not with curiosity. But with quiet judgment. So, you're the one, Daniel said. Adrian didn't respond. Daniel smirked slightly. I expected worse, he added. Give it time, Adrian replied calmly. That caught him off guard. Just for a second. Then Daniel shrugged. Doesn't matter, he said. As long as you do the work. Simple. Direct. Exactly as promised. The first assignment wasn't complicated. Research. Analysis. Planning. Things Adrian used to oversee. Not execute. Now. He did everything himself. He worked quietly. Efficiently. No complaints. No questions. And most importantly, no recognition. By midday, Daniel presented Adrian's work in a meeting. Confident. Polished. Everyone nodded. Impressed. Good thinking, someone said. Daniel smiled. Thank you. Adrian sat at the back of the room. Silent. Watching. The old version of him would have reacted. Would have spoken up. Demanded acknowledgement. But that version of him was gone. Now. He observed. Learned. Understood something deeper. This wasn't just about credit. It was about position. Power didn't always belong to the loudest voice. Sometimes. It belonged to the one no one noticed. Days turned into weeks. Adrian adapted quickly. Faster than anyone expected. Faster than Daniel noticed. Because Daniel wasn't looking for growth. He was looking for results. And Adrian delivered them. Consistently. Quietly. Perfectly. At night, he returned to Grace's apartment. Different from the office. Different from everything else. Simple. Real. How was work? Grace asked one evening. Adrian sat down, loosening his collar slightly. Efficient, he said. She raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound like a good or bad thing. It's both. She studied him for a moment. You're changing, she said. Adrian paused. Am I? Grace nodded. You talk less. A small pause. But you think more. Adrian leaned back slightly. That a problem? She shook her head. No. Another pause. Just different. Adrian didn't respond. Because she was right. He was changing. Not in a way people could see. But in a way that mattered. Back at work, Adrian started noticing things others didn't. Patterns. Weaknesses. Mistakes. Not just in the work, but in the people. Who spoke too much. Who trusted too easily. Who relied on reputation instead of ability. And slowly, he began to understand something powerful. The system wasn't as strong as it looked. It just appeared that way. One evening, Richard Moore called him into his office. Adrian stepped inside. You're adapting well, Moore said. Adrian nodded slightly. I'm learning. Moore studied him carefully. Most people in your position would struggle, he said. Adrian didn't respond. Or complain, Moore added. A pause. You're doing neither. Adrian met his gaze. There's no benefit in either. Moore leaned back slightly. For a moment. He almost smiled. Good, he said. Then. You're starting to understand. Adrian didn't ask what he meant. Because he already did. That night, Adrian stood by the window again. The city lights stretched endlessly before him. But this time, they didn't feel distant. They felt reachable. Not because he had power again, but because he was building something stronger than that. Control. Not over others, but over himself. And that was something no one could take from him again. Adrian exhaled slowly. Then said quietly, I won't lose like that again. Not to betrayal. Not to manipulation. Not to anything he didn't understand. Because this time, he was paying attention. And that made him dangerous. Even if no one knew it yet. For a long time, Adrian stayed in the background. Watching. Learning. Becoming something no one expected. But eventually, watching wasn't enough. Because understanding the system meant one thing. You either stay inside it, or you start bending it. It started with a mistake. Not his. Daniel's. A major proposal. High value. Time sensitive. The kind of deal that could shift influence inside the company. Daniel rushed it. Overconfident. Careless. He presented it like all the others. Polished, rehearsed, confident. But this time, Adrian noticed something. A flaw. Small. Almost invisible. But critical. If left unchecked, it wouldn't just fail. It would cost them everything tied to it. Adrian saw it immediately. And for a moment, he said nothing. Because that was his role. Invisible. Let the system function as it always had. Let the mistake play out. Let Daniel take the fall. It would have been easy. Just stay quiet. But something in him shifted. Not out of loyalty. Not out of kindness. But out of something deeper. Control. Adrian didn't want to win by accident. He wanted to win because he chose to. So he made a decision. After the meeting, Adrian approached Daniel quietly. You missed something, he said. Daniel frowned. What? Adrian pointed to a specific section of the proposal. The numbers don't align with the market trend, he explained. If this goes through as it is, it won't hold. Daniel's expression shifted slightly. From irritation to attention. You're sure? He asked. Adrian nodded. I checked it twice. Silence. Daniel looked at the document again. Longer this time. More carefully. And slowly. His confidence cracked. "Fix it," he said, handing it back. "No thank you." No acknowledgement. But that didn't matter. Because Adrian wasn't doing this for credit. Not yet. That night, Adrian stayed late. Reworking everything. Adjusting projections. Strengthening weak points. Turning something flawed into something solid. Not just acceptable, but exceptional. The next day, Daniel presented it again. This time, the response was different. Stronger. More engaged. Impressed. "This is sharp," one of the executives said. "Very well structured." Daniel nodded confidently. "Thank you." Adrian sat in the same place as always. Silent. But this time, he wasn't just observing. He was measuring. The reactions. The impact. The shift. Because now, he knew something for certain. He wasn't just part of the system. He could influence it. Even from the shadows. Later that day, Richard Moore called him in again. Adrian stepped inside. Moore didn't speak immediately. He simply studied him. Then, "You corrected the proposal?" Not a question. A statement. Adrian didn't deny it. "Yes." Moore nodded slowly. "And you did it without being asked?" Another statement. "Yes." Silence. Then, "Why?" Adrian thought about it. Then answered honestly. "Because I saw the flaw." Moore leaned back slightly. "That's not what I asked." Adrian held his gaze. "I didn't want to watch it fail." A pause. "And I didn't want to win by accident." That answer stayed in the room longer than expected. Moore's expression changed. Subtly. Interest. Recognition. "You're not here to survive, are you?" he said. Adrian didn't hesitate. "No." Silence. Then, Moore nodded. "Good." That word meant more than it sounded. Because it wasn't approval. It was acknowledgement. That evening, Adrian returned home later than usual. Grace was sitting by the table, a book in her hands. "You're late," she said. Adrian set his jacket down. "Work." She looked at him more closely. Something happened. Not a question. Adrian sat across from her. "For the first time," he said slowly. "I didn't just follow." Grace raised an eyebrow. "And?" He leaned back slightly. "I changed something." A small pause. "And no one knows it was me." Grace studied him. Then smiled faintly. "Does that bother you?" Adrian thought about it. Then shook his head. "No." Because it didn't. Not anymore. What mattered wasn't recognition. It was impact. Control. Direction. Grace closed her book. "Then that means you're ready." Adrian frowned slightly. "Ready for what?" She met his gaze. "To stop being invisible." The words lingered. Because deep down, he knew she was right. The phase of survival was ending. And something else, something bigger, was beginning. That night, Adrian stood by the window again. The city no longer felt out of reach. It felt like something he could take back. Not the old way. Not through inheritance. Not through privilege. But through something stronger. Something earned. Adrian exhaled slowly. And for the first time, he allowed himself to think it. "I'm coming back." Not as who he was, but as something better. Something no one saw coming. Control changed everything. Once Adrian realized he could influence outcomes, He stopped thinking like an employee and started thinking like a builder. It didn't begin with a big idea. It began with a small realization. Money didn't come from titles. It came from value. And value could be created anywhere. Adrian started watching more closely at work. Not just the projects, but the patterns behind them. Where money moved. Where it slowed. Where it leaked. He noticed inefficiencies. Gaps no one cared to fix. Because they weren't visible enough to matter. But to Adrian, they mattered. Because hidden gaps meant hidden opportunity. At night, back at Grace's apartment, he began writing things down. Not on anything fancy. Just a worn notebook he found in a drawer. Ideas. Simple at first. Then sharper. More structured. More dangerous. What is that? Grace asked one evening, watching him from across the table. Adrian didn't look up. Something I should have done a long time ago. She tilted her head slightly. Which is? He paused. Then said. Build something that's mine. Grace didn't interrupt. Because she understood the weight behind that. The idea came together slowly. Not rushed. Not forced. Adrian wasn't trying to recreate his old life. He was trying to build something better. Smarter. Independent. A tech platform. Focused on efficiency. Helping businesses identify and fix the same gaps he had been noticing. Small improvements. But scalable. Powerful. It didn't need to be loud. It just needed to work. The problem wasn't the idea. It was everything else. No money. No connections he could use. No reputation to stand on. Just him. So he started small. Very small. Freelance work. Side tasks. Anything that brought in extra income beyond the cafe and his job. Long nights. Short sleep. Constant pressure. There were moments he questioned it. Not the idea. But himself. Was this even possible? Could he really rebuild from nothing? Then he would remember something. Not the scandal. Not the humiliation. But the feeling. Of being powerless. Of losing everything without understanding why. That memory didn't weaken him. It focused him. Weeks turned into months. The notebook filled. The ideas became plans. The plans became action. Adrian built quietly. No announcements. No attention. Just progress. Grace noticed the change. Not in what he said. But in how he moved. More intentional. More controlled. You're not just working anymore, she said one night. Adrian looked up from his notes. No. She leaned forward slightly. What are you doing? He hesitated. Not because he didn't trust her. But because saying it out loud made it real. I'm building something, he said. Grace smiled faintly. I figured. A pause. Is it going to work? Adrian held her gaze. Then said quietly. It has to. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. A small client. Nothing major. But enough. Enough to test the system. Enough to prove the concept. Adrian worked on it himself. Refined it. Adjusted it. Perfected it. And when the results came back, they were undeniable. Efficiency improved. Costs reduced. Impact. Real. Measurable. Adrian stared at the data for a long time. Because this was the moment. Not success. But proof. It could work. That night, he didn't say much. He just sat at the table, the notebook open in front of him. Grace watched him quietly. Well, she asked eventually. Adrian looked up. And for the first time in a long time, there was something different in his eyes. Not hope. Something stronger. Certainty. It works, he said. Grace smiled. I know. He frowned slightly. You didn't even ask what it is. She shrugged lightly. I didn't need to. A pause. I could see it in you. Adrian leaned back slowly. Because she was right. This wasn't just an idea anymore. It was the beginning of something real. That night, as he stood by the window again, the city looked different. Not distant. Not unreachable. But unfinished. Like something waiting to be claimed. Adrian exhaled slowly. Then said quietly. This time. I'm doing it my way. No shortcuts. No illusions. No one else to take the credit. Just him. And the empire he was building. In silence. Success didn't arrive loudly. It crept in. Quiet. Calculated. At first, it looked like coincidence. One client became 2. 2 became 5. Nothing dramatic. Nothing explosive. But the pattern was clear. It was working. Adrian didn't celebrate. He didn't slow down. Because he understood something now. Early success was the most dangerous phase. It made people careless. He refused to be. At work, nothing changed on the surface. He still sat in the back of meetings. Still worked behind Daniel. Still remained invisible. But internally, everything was shifting. Because now, he wasn't just learning the system. He was building something outside it. Something that didn't depend on anyone. The opportunity came unexpectedly. Like most turning points do. A mid-level company approached. Not small. Not insignificant. But struggling. Losing money. Losing direction. They had heard about his work. Not his name. Just the results. And that was enough. Adrian sat across from them in a small conference room. This time, he wasn't the assistant. He wasn't hidden. But he also wasn't revealed. Because the name he used wasn't Adrian Williams. It was just Adrian. You're younger than we expected, one of them said. Adrian didn't react. Results don't have an age, he replied calmly. Silence. Then. Interest. They explained their problem. Messy systems. Poor structure. Wasted resources. Adrian listened. Not interrupting. Not rushing. Just observing. Then he spoke. Not long. Not complicated. Just clear. Direct. And precise. If you follow this, he said, sliding the plan across the table, you won't just recover. A pause. You'll grow. The room went quiet. Because they knew. This wasn't guesswork. This was certainty. What do you want in return? Another asked. Adrian leaned back slightly. This was the moment. The shift. The difference between surviving and building. Equity, he said. They exchanged looks. That's a risk, one of them replied. Adrian nodded. It is. A pause. But so is staying where you are. Silence. Longer this time. Because now. It wasn't just about his idea. It was about belief. Finally. They agreed. Not fully comfortable. Not fully convinced. But willing. And that was enough. The deal wasn't massive. Not yet. But it was something else. Ownership. Control. A step beyond being paid for effort. To being rewarded for impact. Adrian walked out of that building differently. Not visibly, but internally. Something had shifted. Because for the first time, he wasn't just building something. He owned part of it. Weeks passed. The results came faster than expected. Systems improved. Losses reduced. Growth returned. And just like before, the data spoke for itself. The company didn't just recover. It began to expand. Adrian watched it happen quietly. Tracking everything. Refining his methods. Learning not just how to fix businesses, but how to scale them. At work, Richard Moore noticed the change. Not directly, but enough. "You've been busy," he said one afternoon. Adrian didn't deny it. "Yes." Moore studied him carefully. "You're building something." Not a question. A conclusion. Adrian met his gaze. "Yes." A pause. Moore leaned back slightly. "Good." That word again. But this time, it carried something more. Respect. "You won't stay here long," Moore added. Adrian didn't respond. Because he knew that already. That night, Adrian returned home later than usual. Grace was waiting. Not impatient. Just aware. "You look different," she said. Adrian set his keys down. "Do I?" She nodded. Something happened. He sat across from her. "For the first time," he said slowly, "I didn't just build something." A pause. "I own part of it." Grace smiled. "That's a big step." Adrian nodded. "It's just the beginning." She studied him for a moment. Then asked, "Are you ready for what comes with that?" Adrian leaned back slightly. For a moment, he thought about everything. The past. The loss. The lessons. Then he answered, "Yes." Because this time, he wasn't stepping into something blindly. He understood the system. And more importantly, he understood himself. Later that night, Adrian stood by the window again. The city lights stretched endlessly. But now, they didn't feel distant. They felt like territory. Unclaimed. Waiting. Adrian exhaled slowly. And for the first time, he allowed himself to admit it. He wasn't just coming back. He was rising. Stronger. Smarter. Untouchable in ways no one could see yet. And when the world finally noticed, it would already be too late. Growth is quiet, until it isn't. At first, Adrian's work moved beneath the surface. Small companies. Limited exposure. Nothing that would attract attention. And that was exactly how he wanted it. Because attention came with questions. And Adrian wasn't ready to answer them. Not yet. The system he had built began to evolve. What started as simple efficiency improvements became something more. Structured. Refined. Repeatable. Scalable. He gave it a name. Not for the world. Just for himself. Gigatech. It wasn't just a project anymore. It was a foundation. Every client brought new data. New insights. New weaknesses to exploit. And strengths to amplify. Adrian didn't just fix problems anymore. He predicted them. Prevented them. Controlled them. And that's what made it dangerous. The first major shift came quietly. A larger company reached out. Bigger risks. Bigger expectations. And for the first time, bigger money. Adrian didn't rush the decision. He analyzed everything. The company. The structure. The potential. Then he said yes. The results were faster this time. Cleaner. Stronger. Because now, He wasn't experimenting. He knew exactly what he was doing. Within months, the company didn't just stabilize. It surged. Revenue increased. Efficiency tightened. Competitors started noticing. And that's when the questions began. Who's behind this? Who's advising them? Where is this coming from? No one had an answer. Because Adrian made sure of it. He stayed invisible. No public presence. No interviews. No recognition. Just results. At Moore's firm, things were changing too. Daniel's confidence had grown. His reputation improving. All built on work that wasn't his. And for a while, Adrian let it continue. Because it still served a purpose. But something was shifting. Not outside. Inside. He didn't need this anymore. Not in the same way. Richard Moore noticed it before anyone else. You've outgrown this place, he said one evening. Adrian didn't deny it. Yes. A pause. Then why are you still here? Moore asked. Adrian thought about it. Then answered honestly. I wanted to make sure I didn't leave too early. Moore nodded slowly. Timing matters. Yes. Silence. Then. When you leave, Moore said. Leave completely. Adrian met his gaze. I will. That night, everything felt different. Not uncertain. Not fragile. Certain. Grace noticed it immediately. You're about to do something, she said. Adrian set his jacket down. I am. She leaned forward slightly. What? A pause. Then. I'm stepping out. Grace studied him. From the job? Yes. Another pause. And into what? Adrian held her gaze. Everything I've been building. Silence. Not heavy. Just real. Are you ready? She asked. Adrian didn't hesitate this time. Yes. Because this wasn't a guess anymore. It was a decision. Days later. Adrian resigned. No announcement. No drama. Just a quiet exit. Daniel barely reacted. Moore simply nodded. And just like that, Adrian walked away from the last piece of his old survival. Now. There was nothing left to hide behind. No safety net. No fallback. Just gigatech. And the empire it was becoming. Weeks turned into months. Growth accelerated. Not slowly. Exponentially. Bigger companies. Bigger deals. More influence. And still. No one knew. Until one day. They did. A major breakthrough. A deal too big to ignore. A shift too powerful to stay hidden. The name surfaced. Not loudly. But clearly. Gigatech. And just like that, the invisible force became visible. The business world reacted instantly. Curiosity. Interest. And something else. Concern. Because something new had entered the game. Something unknown. Something that didn't follow the usual rules. And at the center of it was a man no one recognized anymore. Adrian stood in his office. Small, but his. Looking out at the same city that once rejected him. Now. It was paying attention. He exhaled slowly. Power doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself. And when it does, everything changes. The invitation came like all the others. Clean. Professional. Expected. But this one was different. Because of the names attached to it. A high-level partnership meeting. Major stakeholders. Industry leaders. And among them, Jake. Adrian stared at the email longer than necessary. Not because he was surprised, but because he understood what it meant. The past was no longer behind him. It was walking toward him. There was another name too. One he hadn't seen in a long time. Charles Williams. His father. Adrian exhaled slowly. No hesitation. No fear. Just clarity. It was going to happen eventually, he said quietly. Grace, sitting across from him, watched carefully. You're ready, she asked. Adrian met her gaze. Yes. Because this time, he wasn't walking in as someone to be judged. He was walking in as someone to be recognized. The building was larger than most. Glass. Steel. Control. Everything his old life used to represent. But this time, he didn't walk in as a son. He walked in as a name. A presence. A force they didn't fully understand yet. Inside, the atmosphere was different. Focused. Tense. Because Gigatech had become something no one could ignore. And today, they would finally meet the mind behind it. Adrian entered the room last. Not by accident. By choice. The moment he stepped in, everything shifted. Not immediately. Not obviously. But enough. Because recognition takes time. And then. Shall we begin? He said calmly. The room didn't move. Because no one expected this. Not like this. Jake started. Then stopped. Because the realization was catching up. You're behind Gigatech, someone else asked. Adrian met their gaze. Yes. Silence. The weight of that answer settled heavily. Because now, everything made sense. The precision. The strategy. The sudden rise. Charles spoke next. His voice quieter than expected. You built this. Adrian looked at him. Yes. No explanation. No defense. Just truth. Another silence. Longer. Because this wasn't just business anymore. This was personal. Jake leaned forward slightly. You expect us to just ignore what happened? He asked. There it was. The past. Trying to reclaim space. Adrian didn't react. Not emotionally. Not defensively. I expect you to focus on what matters, he said. And what is that? Adrian's voice remained steady. The deal. The room shifted again. Because that answer wasn't what they expected. No apology. No explanation. Just control. You don't get to decide that, Jake snapped. Adrian held his gaze. Actually, he said calmly. I do. Silence. Because now, the power dynamic was clear. The man they had dismissed, the one they had judged, was now the one holding the leverage. Adrian leaned forward slightly. The proposal is in front of you, he said. A pause. Review it. No pressure. No force. Just certainty. And that was enough. Because business always chooses results over pride. Minutes passed. Documents reviewed. Numbers analyzed. Silence filled with calculation. And slowly, resistance faded. Because the truth was undeniable. They needed this. They needed him. Jake leaned back finally. This benefits you more than us, he said. Adrian shook his head slightly. No. A pause. It benefits whoever understands it. Charles watched him closely. Not as a father. As a man recognizing something he had underestimated. You've changed, he said quietly. Adrian met his gaze. Yes. No denial. Because he had. Completely. The meeting ended differently than it began. Not with tension. But with agreement. Reluctant. Careful. But real. As people began to leave, Charles remained. Jake hesitated. Then followed the others out. For a moment. It was just the two of them. Again. But everything had changed. You built all this, on your own, Charles said. Adrian didn't respond immediately. Then. Yes. Silence. Years of it. Adrian looked at him. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. Just, understanding. I know, he said. That answer landed differently. Because it wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't rejection either. It was something else. Closure. Adrian stood. No more to say. No need to stay. As he walked out, he didn't look back. Because the past no longer held him. Not as a wound. Not as a weakness. But as something he had already overcome. Success brings attention. But power? Power brings truth. The meeting changed everything. Not just in business. But in the shadows Adrian had left behind. Because once his name resurfaced, so did the past. And the past had secrets. It started with something small. An inconsistency. A detail that didn't fit. Adrian sat in his office late one evening, reviewing old records. Not business ones. Personal. From the time everything fell apart. The hotel. The timeline. The events that didn't make sense. For a long time, he had accepted it as something he couldn't prove. A situation too perfectly set. Too clean. But now. He had resources. Access. And more importantly. Clarity. This wasn't random, he said quietly. Grace, sitting nearby, looked up. You're still thinking about that? Adrian nodded. It doesn't sit right. She studied him for a moment. What are you looking for? He leaned back slightly. The truth. And this time, he wasn't searching blindly. The first step was simple. Security footage. Records from the hotel. Staff logs. Anything that had been ignored before. What he found was enough to raise questions. But not enough to prove anything. Until he looked deeper. A familiar name appeared. Not directly. But connected. Repeated. Hidden in small details most people wouldn't notice. Benson. Adrian stared at the screen. His expression didn't change. But something inside him did. It was him, he said quietly. Grace frowned. Your brother. Adrian nodded slowly. It wasn't obvious. Not at first. But the connections were there. People Benson had access to. Movements that aligned too perfectly. The setup. The timing. Even the woman. Jake's wife. It had all been orchestrated. Not by chance. But by design. Adrian leaned back slowly. Not angry. Not shocked. Just certain. For what? Grace asked. Adrian exhaled. To take my place. And suddenly. Everything made sense. The tension. The quiet resentment. The way Benson had watched him that night. Not confused. Not concerned. But prepared. He didn't just want you gone, Grace said slowly. Adrian nodded. He wanted everything. And he almost got it. Silence filled the room. Not heavy. Just sharp. What are you going to do? Grace asked. Adrian didn't answer immediately. Because this wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. This was about something else. Truth. Control. And timing. I'm going to finish what he started, Adrian said finally. Grace frowned slightly. What does that mean? Adrian stood. His movements calm. Measured. It means, he said. He doesn't get to hide behind it anymore. The next step wasn't emotional. It was strategic. Adrian didn't confront Benson immediately. He prepared. Gathered everything. Proof. Connections. Every piece of the puzzle. Because when he moved, it had to be final. Days later, another meeting was arranged. Not business this time. Family. The Williams estate hadn't changed. Still large. Still controlled. Still filled with the same silence. Adrian walked in without hesitation. This time, no one stopped him. Because now, he wasn't someone they could turn away. Benson was already there. Sitting. Waiting. Their eyes met. And for the first time, there was no distance between them. Adrian, Benson said. His tone calm. But his eyes alert. You look surprised, Adrian replied. Benson smiled slightly. Not really. Of course not. Because people like him always believed they were in control. Charles stood nearby. Watching. Not speaking. What is this about? He asked finally. Adrian didn't answer immediately. He walked forward. Placed a folder on the table. Open it, he said. Benson didn't move. But Charles did. He picked it up. Flipped it open. And as he read, his expression changed. Slowly. From confusion to realization. This, Charles started. Then stopped. Benson's smile faded. What is it? He asked. Charles looked up. At him. You tell me. The room shifted. Because now, the truth wasn't hidden anymore. Benson leaned forward slightly. Still composed. Still controlled. I don't know what you think you found, he said. Adrian stepped closer. It's not what I think, he replied calmly. A pause. It's what you did. Silence. Because denial only works when there's doubt. And there was none left. Benson's expression tightened. Not fear. Not yet. But pressure. You set it up, Adrian continued. From the beginning. No emotion in his voice. Just truth. The hotel. The woman. The timing. A pause. All of it. Charles looked between them. The weight of everything settling heavily. Is this true? He asked. Benson didn't answer. And that was answer enough. The silence that followed was louder than anything else. Charles stepped back slightly. Looking at Benson. Not as a son. But as something else. You did this, he asked again. This time. Benson spoke. I did what I had to. The words landed cold. Sharp. To protect this family, he added. Adrian almost smiled. Protect, he repeated. Benson met his gaze. You were destroying everything, he said. Adrian shook his head slightly. No, he said. A pause. You just wanted it for yourself. And that was the truth. No more layers. No more excuses. Just ambition. Disguised as justification. Charles turned away. Silent. Because some betrayals don't need reaction. They speak for themselves. Adrian stepped back. He wasn't angry. Because this wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about closure. You don't get to rewrite what happened, Adrian said. Benson didn't respond. Because he couldn't. And for the first time, he wasn't in control. Adrian turned. Walked toward the door. No shouting. No fight. Because he didn't need one. He had already won. Not by destroying Benson, but by exposing him. And proving something more important. That the men they cast out was never the problem. Truth doesn't end things. It reveals them. And once everything is exposed, what remains is choice. Adrian didn't go back to the estate. He didn't need to. Because everything that had to be said had already been said. Everything that had to be seen had been revealed. But truth has consequences. And consequences don't stay quiet for long. Within days, the family shifted. Not publicly, but internally. Benson lost his ground. Not instantly. Not dramatically. But steadily. Because trust, once broken, doesn't return. Charles withdrew. Not just from business, but from everything. Including himself. And for the first time, the empire felt unstable. Adrian watched it from a distance. Not as a son. Not as an heir. But as someone no longer tied to it. Grace noticed the silence in him. Not the heavy kind. But the kind that comes after something ends. You're thinking about it, she said one evening. Adrian didn't deny it. Yes. She sat across from him. Do you regret it? Adrian paused. Then shook his head. No. A small silence followed. I regret not seeing it sooner, he added. Grace nodded slowly. That's different. Adrian leaned back slightly. Because it was. Regret didn't mean he wanted to go back. It meant he understood what had happened. And why. What will you do if they ask you to return? Grace asked. The question lingered. Because it mattered. Adrian thought about it carefully. Not emotionally. Not impulsively. Then he answered. I won't. Grace studied him. Not even if everything is yours again. Adrian met her gaze. It was never really mine. A pause. It was given. He leaned forward slightly. What I'm building now. Another pause. That's mine. Grace smiled faintly. Because that was the difference. Ownership wasn't about inheritance. It was about creation. A week later, Charles reached out. Not through business. Not through lawyers. Directly. The message was simple. We need to talk. Adrian stared at it for a long time. Not because he didn't know what it meant. But because he understood what it didn't. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't authority. It was something else. A request. They met in a quiet place. Not the estate. Not an office. Neutral. Charles looked older. Not physically. But in a way that couldn't be hidden. I handled it wrong, he said. No introduction. No excuses. Adrian didn't respond immediately. Because apologies don't erase history. But they do reveal something. I chose reputation over truth, Charles continued. His voice steady. But heavy. And I lost a son because of it. Silence. Adrian looked at him. Not with anger. Not with pain. Just clarity. You didn't lose me, he said. A pause. You pushed me away. The difference mattered. Charles nodded slowly. I know. Another silence. I can't undo that, he said. Adrian shook his head slightly. No. Because some things don't get undone. They get accepted. Charles leaned forward slightly. There's still a place for you, he said. There it was. The offer. Not power. Not control, but return. Adrian didn't hesitate. No. The word landed softly. But firmly. Charles didn't argue. Didn't insist. Because he already knew. You've built something, he said. Adrian nodded. Yes. Charles exhaled slowly. I'm proud of you. The words came late. Very late. But they were real. Adrian didn't smile. Didn't react. But something shifted. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. But acceptance. I don't need the family name anymore, Adrian said. A pause. I needed to become someone without it. Charles nodded. I see that now. And for the first time, they weren't speaking as father and son, but as two men who finally understood each other. When Adrian left, he didn't feel lighter. He felt resolved. Because closure isn't about feeling good. It's about being done. That night, he returned home. Grace looked up the moment he walked in. You saw him, she said. Adrian nodded. And he took a moment. Then said, I let it go. Grace smiled. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Adrian stood by the window again. The city stretched endlessly. But now, it didn't feel like something he needed to conquer. It felt like something he had already claimed. In his own way. He exhaled slowly. And for the first time, there was no past pulling at him. No weight. No unfinished story. Just forward. Success had a sound. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just steady. The quiet rhythm of something that no longer needed to prove itself. Giga Tech had grown beyond expectation. Not explosive. But undeniable. Partnerships expanded. Influence deepened. And Adrian remained exactly where he had always been. In control. But this time, it wasn't about building anymore. It was about choosing. Because there comes a moment when survival ends and life begins. Adrian stood in his office, looking out over the city. The same city that once watched him fall. Now, it watched him rise. Without even realizing it. His phone buzzed lightly. A message. From Grace. Don't be late today. A small smile touched his lips. Wouldn't dare, he murmured. Grace had changed too. Not in who she was, but in what she allowed herself to be. She no longer carried everything alone. No longer fought every battle silently. The cafe had grown. Expanded. Still simple. Still real. But now. Stronger. And through it all, they had stayed the same. Honest. Grounded. Uncomplicated in a world that constantly tried to complicate everything. That evening, Adrian walked into the cafe. Not as someone passing through, but as someone who belonged. Grace looked up from behind the counter. You're late, she said. Adrian glanced at his watch. 2 minutes. She raised an eyebrow. That's late. He walked closer. Closer than he used to. Closer than he ever allowed himself before. I'll make it up to you, he said quietly. Grace tilted her head slightly. Is that a promise? Adrian met her gaze. Yes. Silence settled between them. Not awkward. Not uncertain. Just real. Because everything that needed to happen had already happened. Everything that needed to be fought had already been fought. What remained Was choice. Adrian reached into his pocket slowly. Not dramatic. Not rehearsed. Just intentional. Grace watched him. Her expression shifting slightly. Adrian, she started. But he shook his head gently. Let me finish, he said. His voice wasn't nervous. Not uncertain. Just steady. I had everything once, he said. A pause. And I lost it. Grace didn't interrupt. I thought that meant I lost everything that mattered. Another pause. But I was wrong. He took a step closer. I didn't lose anything important. A small silence. I just hadn't found it yet. Grace's eyes softened. And for the first time, Adrian let himself say it without holding back. You. The word landed quietly. But it carried everything. I didn't build this life just to stand in it alone, he continued. A pause. I built it so I could choose who stands in it with me. Another step closer. And I choose you. Silence. Not empty. Full. Because some moments don't need anything else. Grace exhaled slowly. Not because she didn't know what to say. But because she felt it. All of it. You're not the same man I met, she said quietly. Adrian shook his head. No. A small pause. But I became someone better because of you. Grace smiled faintly. You became that yourself, she said. Another silence. Then. Yes, she added. Just one word. But it changed everything. Time didn't rush after that. It settled. Adrian didn't go back to the world he lost. He didn't need to. Because the life he built was stronger. Real. Not inherited. Earned. Giga Tech continued to grow. Quietly dominating. Reshaping. And Adrian. He stayed exactly where he chose to be. Not chasing power. But holding it. Not seeking validation. But living with purpose. And beside him was the one person who had seen him. Before the fall. During the fall. And after the rise. Grace. Not part of his empire. But the reason it meant anything. Adrian stood by the window one last time. The city stretched endlessly before him. But this time, he didn't see something to conquer. He saw something he had already overcome. He exhaled slowly. And for the first time, he wasn't thinking about what came next. Because for once, this was enough.